They gave him to her as a watchdog, but she turned him into her greatest ally. And maybe something more. Jake Taylor sat in his truck outside the Riverside Valley Agricultural Cooperative building, staring at the email on his phone one more time. The subject line read, "Mandatory assignment, effective immediately." He'd been an agricultural consultant for 6 years now, built his reputation from scratch, and never once had he been assigned to a client against his will. Yet here he was, about to walk into a situation that felt wrong from the start. The parking lot was quiet except for the sound of gravel crunching under someone's boots. Jake looked up to see an older man in a suit waving him toward the entrance. That would be Gerald Pritchard, the board chairman who'd sent the email. Jake grabbed his briefcase and stepped out into the cool morning air. Inside, the building smelled like old wood and coffee. Pritchard led him down a narrow hallway lined with photos of prize-winning cattle and smiling farmers holding ribbons. They stopped at a conference room where 3 other board members sat around a long table. None of them looked particularly friendly. "Mr. Taylor, thank you for coming on such short notice," Pritchard said, gesturing to an empty chair. Jake sat down, placing his briefcase beside him. "I'm sure you're wondering why we've asked you here." "The email mentioned a mandatory assignment," Jake replied. "I have to admit that's a first for me." Pritchard nodded, folding his hands on the table. "We have a delicate situation. Rebecca Hartwell's operation. You might have heard about her father passing away last spring." Jake had heard. Thomas Hartwell had been a legend in the cattle breeding world. His death had been sudden, a heart attack while checking on the herd one morning. The whole agricultural community had mourned. "His daughter has taken over," Pritchard continued. 23 years old. Youngest person to ever pass the Master Breeder Certification exam, which is impressive, don't get me wrong. But running an operation of that size? That's different from passing a test. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He didn't like where this was going. "The board has concerns," another member chimed in, a woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, "about her ability to manage the breeding program without supervision. We need someone experienced to keep an eye on things. Make sure everything stays up to standard." "You want me to babysit her?" Jake said flatly. Pritchard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We prefer the term advisory consultant. You'll be assigned to the Hartwell farm for a minimum of 1 year. Your reports will come directly to this board. It's a condition of her maintaining the farm's certification and access to breeding grants." Jake leaned back in his chair. "Does she know about this?" "She's been informed. She'll be here any minute, actually." As if on cue, the door opened. A young woman walked in, and Jake knew immediately this was Rebecca Hartwell. She had her father's determined eyes and the same set to her jaw that Jake had seen in photos. She wore work jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Rebecca, good of you to join us," Pritchard said with that same fake smile. "It's Becca," she corrected, not bothering to sit down. "And let's not pretend this is a friendly meeting. You're here to tell me I've been assigned to keep her." The room went silent. Jake found himself respecting her directness even as he felt the awkwardness of the situation settle over him like a heavy blanket. "This is Jake Taylor," Pritchard said, gesturing toward him. "One of the finest agricultural consultants in the region. He'll be working with you to ensure your operation meets all board standards." Becca's eyes landed on Jake and he saw the flash of resentment there. Not directed at him personally, but at what he represented. The board's lack of faith in her. The assumption that she couldn't handle her own family's farm. "Working with me," she repeated slowly. "That's an interesting way to put it. Makes it sound like I have a choice." "You do have a choice," the gray-haired woman said. "You can accept Mr. Taylor's assistance or you can forfeit your certification." Jake watched Becca's hands curl into fists at her sides. She was fighting to keep her composure and he couldn't blame her. If someone had done this to him when he was starting out, he would have been furious too. "Fine," Becca said through gritted teeth. "When does my prize consultant start?" The word prize hit Jake like a slap. That's exactly what this felt like. He was being handed to her like some kind of trophy or reward, except neither of them wanted it. He was just a tool the board was using to control her. Pritchard shuffled some papers. "Immediately, we've prepared a contract outlining the terms of the arrangement. Mr. Taylor will have full access to your facilities, breeding records, and financial documents. He'll attend all major decisions regarding the breeding program and submit monthly reports to this board." "Of course he will," Becca muttered. Jake finally spoke up. "I'd like to say something if that's all right." Everyone turned to look at him. He stood up, meeting Becca's eyes directly. "I didn't ask for this assignment," he said. "I don't like being told who I have to work with any more than you probably like being told you need supervision. But I'm a professional, and if this is happening, I'd rather we figure out how to make it work than fight each other for a year." Becca studied him for a long moment. "That's a nice speech. But you're still here because they don't think I can do this on my own." "Maybe I'm here because they're old-fashioned and scared of change," Jake countered. "Maybe I'm here because your father's death left a hole in the agricultural community and they're panicking. I don't know their reasons, and honestly, I don't care. What I care about is doing my job with integrity." Something shifted in Becca's expression, though she didn't soften entirely. "My farm tomorrow morning. 6 o'clock. If you're going to be watching over my shoulder, you might as well see what the work actually looks like." With that, she turned and walked out of the room. The door closed behind her with a definitive click. Pritchard cleared his throat. "She's spirited. She's angry," Jake said. "And she has every right to be." He picked up his briefcase. "I'll need copies of her current breeding program documentation and the past 3 years of records. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right." As he left the building, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something much more complicated than a simple consulting job. In the parking lot, he saw Becca's truck pulling out onto the main road, dust kicking up behind the tires. She drove fast, like she was trying to outrun something. Jake sat in his truck for a minute, thinking. He'd built his career on being fair and thorough. He'd never taken a job where his presence was meant to undermine someone. But turning down a board assignment would hurt his reputation, maybe even cost him his certification. He was trapped just as much as Becca was. The next morning, Jake arrived at the Hartwell farm at 5:45. He wanted to be early to show he was serious about this. The property was beautiful in the dawn light, with rolling pastures stretching out as far as he could see. The main barn was a classic red structure that looked well-maintained, and in the distance he could see cattle grazing peacefully. Becca was already in the barn when he walked in. She was checking on a pregnant cow, running her hand along the animal's side with practiced care. She glanced up when she heard his footsteps but didn't say anything. "Morning," Jake offered. "You're early." "So are you." Becca straightened up, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I'm always early. Animals don't care about human schedules. They need what they need when they need it." Jake nodded. "Your father taught you that?" Her expression hardened. "Don't do that. Don't try to bond with me over my dad. I know what this is. You're here to report back to Pritchard and his buddies, to find mistakes, to prove I'm too young or too inexperienced or too whatever. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here, Jake?" She crossed her arms. "Really? Why did you take this assignment?" It was a fair question. Jake had been asking himself the same thing all night. Because if I didn't, they would have sent someone else. Someone who might actually be looking for reasons to shut you down. Becca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And you're not?" "I'm looking to do my job, which means evaluating your operation fairly. If you're running things well, my reports will say that. If there are problems, we'll fix them together." "Together," she repeated, that same skeptical tone from yesterday. "You know what the worst part is? I actually do need help. I'd never admit that to Pritchard and his board, but it's true. Running this place alone is overwhelming, but I can't ask for help now because everyone will think it proves their point, that I can't handle it." Jake saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she was carrying. "What if we make a deal?" "What kind of deal?" "You let me do my job. Full access like the contract says. But in return, I work for you, not the board. I help you actually run this place better. I give you honest feedback, not ammunition for them to use against you." Becca studied him carefully. "Why would you do that?" "Because I remember being underestimated," Jake said quietly. "I didn't have family connections in this industry. I had to prove myself every single day, and I had people who gave me a fair shot. Maybe I can be that person for you." For the first time, Becca's defensive wall seemed to crack just a little. "I don't trust easily." "I wouldn't expect you to." She took a breath, then. The first few weeks were rough. Becca kept Jake at arm's length, showing him around the farm but never really letting him in. She'd answer his questions with the bare minimum information, schedule important meetings when she knew he had other appointments, and make decisions without consulting him first. Jake understood her resistance, but it didn't make the situation any easier. He spent his mornings at the farm, watching how she worked. Despite her youth, Becca knew cattle. She could spot a sick animal from across a field, understood bloodlines and genetics better than consultants twice her age, and had an instinctive sense for breeding timing that impressed even Jake. But she was also stubborn to a fault, refusing advice even when it made sense. One evening in late October, everything changed. Jake was at home just sitting down to dinner when his phone rang. Becca's name flashed on the screen. "Jake, I need you to come to the farm now." Her voice was tight with stress. "What's wrong?" "It's Stella. She's in labor and something's not right." Jake grabbed his keys and was out the door in seconds. Stella was Becca's most valuable cow, a champion Angus with a pedigree worth tens of thousands of dollars. More importantly, Jake knew Stella had been her father's favorite. Losing her would be devastating in more ways than one. He made the 20-minute drive in 15, his truck kicking up gravel as he pulled into the farm's driveway. The barn lights were blazing. Inside, he found Becca in the birthing stall with Stella, who was lying on her side breathing hard. The cow's distress was obvious even to Jake's eyes. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, kneeling beside Becca. 2 hours. "The contractions started, but nothing's happening. I think the calf's positioned wrong." Becca's hands were shaking as she ran them over Stella's swollen belly. "I called Dr. Morrison, but he's 2 hours away dealing with an emergency at the Preston Ranch." Jake rolled up his sleeves. "I've helped with difficult births before. We need to check the position." Together, they worked to assess the situation. Jake was right, the calf was breech turned the wrong way in the birth canal. Without intervention, both mother and baby would die. "We have to turn the calf," Jake said. "Have you done this before?" "In training. Never for real." Becca's voice cracked slightly. "My dad always handled the complicated births." Jake looked at her directly. "We can do this, but I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" After a moment, Becca nodded. The pride and defensiveness that usually armored her had fallen away, leaving only fear and determination. They worked together for the next hour. Jake guided Becca through the process, his experience combining with her steady hands and deep knowledge of cattle anatomy. It was delicate, dangerous work. One wrong move could injure Stella or the calf. Sweat dripped down both their faces despite the cool night air. "There," Jake said finally. "I can feel the calf shifting. Keep going just like that." Becca's arms were deep in the birth canal, carefully maneuvering the calf into the correct position. Her face was a mask of concentration. I think I've got it." Minutes later, with one final push from Stella, the calf slid free. It was a beautiful heifer, black and perfect. Jake quickly cleared the calf's airways while Becca checked on Stella. The mother cow was exhausted but alive. They sat back against the stall wall, both breathing hard. The calf was already trying to stand on wobbly legs, and Stella was lifting her head to nuzzle her baby. "You did it," Jake said quietly. "We did it," Becca corrected. She wiped her face with her sleeve, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. If you hadn't known what to do, but I did come, and you were amazing. Your hands, your knowledge of where everything needed to be. Your dad would have been proud." Becca's eyes filled with tears, and this time she didn't try to hide them. "I was so scared. When I felt the calf positioned wrong, all I could think was that I was going to lose her, that I'd fail at the one thing my dad trusted me to do." Jake understood then just how much pressure she'd been carrying. It wasn't just about proving herself to the board. It was about living up to her father's legacy, about not letting down the memory of a man who'd built something incredible. "You haven't failed," Jake said firmly. "You saved them both. You made the right call to ask for help, and you had the skill to follow through." They stayed in the barn that night, taking turns monitoring Stella and the calf. As the hours passed, they talked more than they ever had before. Becca told him about growing up on the farm, about being the only kid in school who smelled like hay and cattle, about how her dad had taught her everything, had believed in her when teachers said she should focus on more practical career paths for women. Jake shared his own story, about being the first in his family to go to agricultural college, about working 3 jobs to pay for his education, about the consultant who'd taken a chance on him when no one else would, and how that had shaped his entire approach to this work. As dawn broke, Dr. Morrison finally arrived. He checked over Stella and the calf, pronouncing them both healthy and strong. After he left, Becca turned to Jake. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I've been treating you like the enemy, like you're just here to spy on me and report back to Pritchard. You had reason to be defensive. Maybe, but you showed up tonight without hesitation. You didn't gloat about being right about needing help. You just helped. She paused. I've been so focused on proving I don't need anyone that I forgot asking for help isn't the same as being weak. Jake smiled. Some of the strongest people I know are the ones who recognize when they need support. My dad used to say something similar. Becca looked out at the pasture where the sun was rising over the hills. He'd say that a good farmer knows their land, but a great farmer knows their limitations. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. She turned back to Jake. So here's what I'm thinking. Instead of fighting this arrangement, what if we actually try to make it work? Real collaboration, not just you watching me from the sidelines. I'd like that. Good. Because I have about 1,000 questions about the breeding program schedule, and I've been too stubborn to ask them. She held out her hand. Partners? Jake shook her hand. Partners. Over the following weeks, everything shifted. Becca started including Jake in decisions, asking his opinion on breeding schedules and genetic pairings. Jake shared industry contacts and research he'd accumulated over the years. They developed a rhythm, each one complementing the other's strengths. The farm started running more smoothly. Small inefficiencies that Becca had lived with because her father had always done things that way got streamlined. Jake's fresh perspective helped her see opportunities for improvement she'd been too close to notice. But not everyone was happy about their growing partnership. At the monthly board meeting in November, Pritchard looked through Jake's report with obvious disappointment. Everything is in order? He asked, as if he'd been hoping for problems. Better than order, Jake replied. Becca has implemented some innovative tracking systems for genetic lines. She's actually ahead of industry standards in several areas. The board members exchanged glances. The gray-haired woman whose name Jake had learned was Victoria Ashford frowned. That's quite a glowing report for someone who supposedly needed oversight. She needed support, not oversight, Jake corrected. There's a difference. After the meeting, Pritchard pulled Jake aside in the parking lot. You seem to be getting quite comfortable out at the Hartwell place. I'm doing my job. Your job is to ensure standards are maintained, to provide objective assessment. Pritchard's smile was thin, not to become her friend. Jake felt his temper rise but kept his voice level. My job is to consult. That's what I'm doing. If you're disappointed that I'm not finding problems where none exist, that says more about your expectations than my work. He walked away before Pritchard could respond, but the interaction left him uneasy. There was something else going on here, something beyond just concern about Becca's age and experience. Back at the farm, he found Becca in her office, surrounded by papers. She was preparing for the regional breeding exhibition in February, the biggest event of the year for cattle breeders. It was where reputations were made or broken, where buyers came to see the best stock in the region. How'd the board meeting go? She asked without looking up. Pritchard wasn't thrilled with my report. Now she looked up. Because everything's going well? Seems like it. Jake sat down across from her. Becca, do you know why the board is so invested in finding problems with your operation? She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. There's a corporate agricultural company that's been trying to buy this land for 2 years. They approached my dad multiple times. He always refused, said this farm would stay family-owned. After he died, they came back with an even bigger offer. And you said no? Of course I said no. This farm is my family's legacy. But if I lose my certification, if the board can declare me incompetent to run the operation. She trailed off, the implication clear. They could force a sale, Jake finished. His stomach turned. This wasn't about standards or oversight, this was about money and land development. Pritchard has friends in the corporate office, Becca continued. I can't prove anything, but I'd bet good money he's getting something out of this. Jake thought about Pritchard's disappointment at the positive report, his pointed comments about objectivity. It all made sense now. He expected me to find problems, or make them up. Probably. But you didn't. Becca smiled slightly. You're not what I expected, Jake Taylor. Neither are you, Becca Hartwell. They worked late into the evening, preparing for the exhibition. As Jake drove home that night, he realized something had changed between them. What had started as forced proximity had become genuine respect. And maybe, just maybe, something more. But he pushed that thought away. They had enough complications without adding personal feelings into the mix. The exhibition was in 3 months and they had work to do. Still, as he lay in bed that night, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the way Becca had smiled at him in the barn. The way they'd worked together to save Stella and her calf. The way she'd started to trust him. Whatever this was becoming, it was more than just a consulting job, and that scared him almost as much as it excited him. Winter settled over the valley, and with it came the intense preparation for the regional breeding exhibition. Becca threw herself into the work with single-minded focus. She spent hours grooming her best cattle, reviewing pedigree documents, and rehearsing her presentation for the judges. Jake found himself at the farm almost every day now, not because the board required it, but because he wanted to be there. He'd help with the early morning feeding, then spend afternoons reviewing breeding data and industry trends. Evenings were spent in Becca's office, strategizing about the exhibition and discussing ways to showcase her innovative genetic tracking system. "You don't have to be here this much," Becca said one night as they worked through dinner. She'd ordered pizza and they ate while surrounded by charts and spreadsheets. "I know," Jake replied, taking another slice. "But this exhibition is important. Your whole reputation rides on it. And yours too now." She gave him a knowing look. "You've tied yourself to my success. If I fail, it reflects on your judgment." "I'm not worried about that." "Why not?" Jake met her eyes. "Because I've seen your work. I've seen how much you care about these animals, how much thought you put into every breeding decision. You're not going to fail." Becca's expression softened. "You have a lot more faith in me than I have in myself sometimes. Then borrow mine until yours catches up." It was a simple statement, but it hung in the air between them like something more significant. Becca looked away first, clearing her throat and shuffling papers. The moment passed, but Jake felt the shift. There was a growing connection between them that went beyond professional collaboration. The way she laughed at his bad jokes. The way he found himself watching her work with the cattle, admiring her skill and patience. The accidental brushes of hands when they reached for the same document. He knew he should pull back, maintain proper boundaries, but the truth was he didn't want to. In January, a complication arose. Daniel Foster, another breeder who'd been competing with the Hartwell farm for decades, filed a formal complaint with the board. He claimed that Becca was receiving unfair advantages through her relationship with Jake and questioned the legitimacy of her breeding records. The accusation was absurd. Becca's records were meticulous and Jake had been scrupulous about following proper consulting protocols. But the complaint triggered an automatic ethics investigation. "This is Pritchard's doing." Becca fumed when she got the notice. They were in the barn and she paced back and forth like a caged animal. "Foster never had the guts to challenge my dad directly, but now he smells blood in the water." "We'll fight it," Jake said firmly. "Your records are clean. The investigation will prove that." "Will it? Or will they find some technicality, some excuse to say I've been receiving improper assistance?" She stopped pacing and looked at him. "Jake, you need to step back from this. From me. If they think there's something inappropriate happening between us, it'll give them exactly what they need. There isn't anything inappropriate happening." "Isn't there?" Becca's voice was quiet but intense. "Be honest. We've gotten close. People talk. Pritchard made comments about how much time you spend here." Jake wanted to argue, but she was right. They had gotten close, maybe too close. "What do you want me to do?" "The board is suspending your advisory duties pending the investigation. You're not supposed to be involved with my operation until it's resolved." She handed him a copy of the suspension notice. "I have to defend myself alone. The hearing is in 3 weeks, right before the exhibition." It felt like the ground was dropping out from under him. "Becca, I can't just abandon you when you need support. You have to. If you don't, they'll use it against both of us." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I knew this was going to happen eventually. I knew that letting someone in, letting myself rely on you, was going to backfire. That's not fair. We didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter what we did or didn't do. It matters what they can make it look like." Becca's voice cracked. "I need you to leave, Jake. I need to handle this on my own. At least let me help you prepare for the hearing. They can't stop me from offering advice." She hesitated, clearly torn between pride and practicality. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but carefully. We can't be seen together." For the next 3 weeks, they communicated mostly through encrypted messages and late-night phone calls. Jake coached Becca on how to present her case, helped her organize evidence to counter Foster's claims, and connected her with other breeders who could testify to her integrity. It was torture being kept away from the farm, from her. Jake realized just how much the work had come to mean to him, and how much Becca herself had come to mean to him. This wasn't just professional respect anymore. Somewhere along the way, he'd fallen for her. But he couldn't tell her that. Not now, when everything was so precarious. The night before the hearing, Becca called him at midnight. She sounded exhausted. "I can't do this," she said without preamble. "I've been going through the evidence, and I know I'm right. But I'm terrified. What if they don't care about facts? What if they've already decided?" "Then you make them care," Jake said. "You walk in there tomorrow and you show them exactly who you are. Not Thomas Hartwell's daughter, not the youngest breeding director. You show them Becca Hartwell, who saved a breech calf in the middle of the night, who innovated a genetic tracking system that's better than anything the industry has seen, who loves those animals and that land more than anyone could question." "I'm scared of failing my dad," she whispered. "Of losing everything he built." "Your dad didn't just build a farm, he built you. He raised someone strong enough and smart enough to carry on his legacy. That's what you're defending tomorrow. Not just land or certification, but the person you've become." There was a long silence. Then Becca said, "Thank you. For everything. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that having you believe in me has meant everything. I'll be there tomorrow. In the hearing room, you won't be alone. Jake, if you're there, it might make things worse. I don't care. You stood alone long enough. Tomorrow, you'll look up and see someone on your side." After they hung up, Jake lay awake thinking about the hearing, about Becca, about how his life had changed since that first awkward meeting in the boardroom. He'd taken this assignment reluctantly, feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. Now he couldn't imagine not being part of Becca's world. The hearing was held at the Regional Agricultural Office, a sterile government building that felt nothing like the warm, living world of the farm. Becca arrived early, dressed in professional clothes that made her look older and more formal. Jake saw the tension in her shoulders as she walked past him into the hearing room. Foster was there with his lawyer, looking confident. Pritchard and the board members sat at a long table at the front of the room. Victoria Ashford was present, along with 2 new faces that Jake didn't recognize. Apparently, the investigation was serious enough to bring in outside board members from other districts. The hearing began with Foster's lawyer presenting the complaint. They claimed that Becca had received preferential treatment through Jake's consulting, that her records showed impossible improvements in a short time, and that her genetic tracking system was too sophisticated for someone her age to have developed alone. Each accusation made Jake angrier. They were basically saying that Becca was either cheating or too incompetent to have achieved what she'd achieved. Both interpretations were insults. Then it was Becca's turn. She stood up, and Jake saw her take a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Chairman Pritchard, board members, I'm here to defend my reputation and my family's legacy. The accusations made today are false, and I have evidence to prove it." For the next hour, Becca methodically dismantled every claim. She showed her detailed breeding records, complete with dates and witnesses, she explained. The room went silent. Pritchard's face went pale. "That's not relevant to this hearing." "I think it is. Greenfield has been trying to purchase my property for years. If you stand to benefit from my farm being declared incompetent and forced into sale, that seems like a significant conflict of interest." Becca pulled out a folder and handed copies to each board member. "These are public records showing that Pritchard Consulting LLC received $50,000 from Greenfield last year, with another $50,000 promised upon successful acquisition of properties in this district. My farm is the largest undeveloped property in the acquisition zone." The outside board members started flipping through the documents, their expressions growing more serious. Victoria Ashford looked shocked, then furious. Where did you get these? Pritchard demanded. Public business filings, Becca replied calmly. Available to anyone who knows where to look. I became suspicious when this board seemed more interested in finding problems than in supporting local agriculture. So I did some research. One of the outside board members, an older man with white hair, held up his hand. I think we need to adjourn this hearing to review this new information. Chairman Pritchard, you'll need to recuse yourself from any further proceedings related to the Hartwell operation. Pritchard looked like he wanted to argue, but the other board members were already standing, clearly done with him. He stormed out of the room, shooting Becca a look of pure hatred. After the board members filed out, Becca stayed seated at the table, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Jake made his way to her. How did you find those records? He asked quietly. Late-night internet searches. Lot of coffee. She looked up at him with a tired smile. I almost called you to help, but I figured I'd gotten you in enough trouble. You were amazing in there. The way you presented everything, how you stayed calm even when Pritchard tried to intimidate you. Jake sat down next to her. Your dad would be so proud. I hope so. Becca's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I think we actually might win this. I think you already did. They sat there in the empty hearing room, neither of them quite ready to leave. Finally, Becca said, The exhibition is in 5 days. If the board clears me, I'll actually get to compete. When they clear you, Jake corrected. There's no if. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Thank you for being here. I looked up during the hearing and seeing you there, it helped. Jake squeezed back, letting himself enjoy the simple contact. Where else would I be? The answer came 3 days later. The board not only cleared Becca of all accusations, but also issued a formal apology. Pritchard was removed as chairman and was being investigated for ethics violations. Foster's complaint was dismissed as baseless, and he received a warning about filing frivolous grievances. Becca called Jake the moment she got the news. We did it. We actually did it. You did it, he replied. I just watched you be incredible. Don't downplay your part. You helped me see that asking for help isn't weakness. You taught me that I could be strong and vulnerable at the same time. She paused. Jake, after the exhibition, we need to talk about us, about what this all means. I'd like that. Good. Because I think we both know this stopped being just professional.